So when I graduated, I went immediately to London, the lure of golden streets and things. And eventually I got a job in book publishing. And my first job was publishing books about architecture. And I was really lucky in that the company I was going to, they were called Architectural Press, and they had this gorgeous old house near Buckingham Palace. I'm not a royally person, but it was opposite St. James's Park in London. And the best thing about it was, though, it was all like higgledy-piggledy on different things. Best bits about it, the guys who'd started Architectural Press recreated a Victorian pub in the basement. So we had all our book launches. So when we had new books, we had these big parties in the basement, and that's what kept me in book publishing. that and travel. I used to travel a lot in my old job. I used to go around all the universities in Europe and the US. So that was really exciting. So my first job was in admin, then I went into sales, and then I went into commissioning. Commissioning is when you work directly with the authors and decide whether or not to publish their books. So that's how I started my first job, drinking basically. As someone said, I was the girl who put pub into publishing. There you go.
I like that. Oh, yeah, that's the headline.
I mean, my question essentially was, can you tell us about your career in publishing? But you kind of just did.
Yeah, well, I was in there on and off in publishing for about 20 years. So, and so progressed, from admin to sales to commissioning. And then I ended up, my last job was, I was in charge of science publishing, which included computer science, maths, geography, chemistry, physics, engineering, computer engineering, some early HTML, media. I did a lot on the embryonic internet and the World Wide Web. So I was head of science publishing for the whole of Europe and the Middle East. So it was quite a high level job. But I was the architect of my own downfall, actually, because I published one of the very first books on the World Wide Web and the internet. I met Tim Berners-Lee, who is the inventor of the World Wide Web. So I used to travel a lot for my job. So I used to have to go to conferences to find out what new and exciting elements were happening in physics and computer science. And I was not tech savvy. I'm an English girly. And I went along, and I went to a networking conference in Paris. And I was there, and this guy said, "Oh, you've got to meet this guy called Tim. He's got a really good idea. It's called the World Wide Web." Tim Berners-Lee at that point was working in CERN. Do you know CERN in Switzerland, which is the hydro, the big
Large Hadron Collider.
Yeah, collider. So I went out to CERN. I couldn't work out why they needed something so big to find something so tiny. I mean, physics is not my strong point. Met Tim Berners-Lee, and he goes, he gave me his book proposal, which I still have at home, actually. And it had a spider on the front with a web, and he goes, World Wide Web, and he showed me, and I was like, it looks great. Anyway, I spoke to, when we signed books, we had to make sure it's going to sell in the US as well, because that was the biggest market. So I rang my counterpart in the US and said, this guy's got this idea. He goes, never happen. I go, okay, why not? He goes, invented in Europe. Things in IT and computing only fly if they're invented in the US. We ignored him. I signed him to write a book for me. 3 months later, he'd gone from CERN, he'd gone to MIT in the US, which is a big technical university. I don't know if you know it, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He'd gone there, and that was it, into the ether, into the World Wide Web. And then 6 months later, it exploded, and the World Wide Web became obviously a big thing. But the World Wide Web took away my role really, because as a publisher, you're the bridge between the author and the audience. And traditionally, it had been bookshops. So you go to the publisher, they would take your idea, knock it into shape, make a book, and then you'd sell it via bookshops. So traditionally, the spine of a book has been the most important element because that was what you saw in bookshops. Amazon came along very early and took away the role of the bookshop. Then the World Wide Web and the internet took away my role as the bridge between the author with their notes and the finished book. So you can publish now on Amazon and lots and lots, self-publish really easily. There's loads and loads and loads of really rubbish books out there because everybody thinks they're an author. And also they don't go through the editorial process. So basically there was lots of different processes to getting the book published. First of all, you'd come up with the idea, you'd pitch the idea. You take it to a publisher and then they would look at it. I used to look at it and think, nah. There's only 20 books on that. I don't need another one. Or this looks really interesting. Then you're left to do the writing, you submit your manuscript, and then it goes through rigorous editorial, so copy editing, checking for mistakes, rearranging it. Nowadays, it's all done electronically, so there's a lot less jobs in publishing now than there used to be. It used to be quite, like with film industry as well, to be quite a physical, hands-on job, and now it's not. So I was the architect of my own downfall. We published loads and loads of books on the internet and the World Wide Web, and then eventually we did ourselves out of a job, basically. So there's a lot of people I used to work with now work in education or charities or so.
So my question was, I'm sure Richard sort of told you roughly what we're doing.
I know, it sounds brilliant.
We're creating our own stories that will hopefully become little Trikanori clips. My question was, what advice can you give us that could help us create our own successful story?
Oh, it's really difficult because it depends on your age group. Are you all pitching at a similar age group?
I think it's
what ages?
5 to 11.
5 to 11.
5 to 7.
We've got 3 different age groups, haven't we? We've got the nursery, we've got the 5 to 11.
Yeah, so I mean, you obviously need to have a look at see what works and what doesn't. It's really competitive, isn't it? The children's publishing market. Everybody thinks that they've got a children's book in them. It depends on the age. I've never published for children. I mean, I've obviously read. I've got my own kids, so I read to them from babies, and now they don't read at all. They're boys. Even one who's done a history degree, we'd rather watch YouTube. So it's really disheartening. I would look at what is successful in that age group, what does sell well, and I think with children's books, definitely, obviously, a lot of illustrations, big text, exciting, fast-moving stories. Interesting characters. I think, Julia Donaldson's books do really well, don't they? Because they've got the Gruffalo and the Stickman. And did you grow up with those? Yeah. No, did you not? The Gruffalo.
The Gruffalo. You don't know who the Gruffalo is?
You don't know who the Gruffalo is?
You've not heard Room on a Broom?
Room on a Broom.
No.
Or the Stickman.
The Stickman's always on at Christmas.
I like the Stickman.
I remember reading that.
And I think with her books, there's quite a lot of repetition, isn't there? And I used to like that one, I'm Not Your Mummy. Well, the monkey that tries to find his mummy, and he thinks the spider's the mummy, and then. So I think with children's books, there's quite a lot of repetition and reinforcement and quite simple words. I wouldn't overcomplicate things and make it quite sing-songy. So it's quite rhythm, rhythm and rhyme, and then lots and lots of pictures that you can, especially with little ones, that you can point out. Oh, the whale and the sail in the whale, yeah. Richard, it's a whole load of books. Well,
I have, I can't remember. Oh, Apart from my family.
Anyway, I'm sorry that it's not very helpful, but
No, it's good.
My question is, in your role as an English teacher, what trends have you noticed in children's reading habits?
oh, they don't read. They don't read, and I think it's a gender divide is a big thing. I think the ones that read are girls still. I don't know. Do you read? Does anybody, any of the boys, any of you read books? No, no. Girls, anybody read books? Yeah, huge gender divide.
What I hear, I don't read because I'm dyslexic, or no, I don't read because I'm ADHD.
Oh,
That's what I hear a lot. So they kind of use it as an excuse, so I don't have to.
well, my kids don't read. I think that the most they read, one's done a history degree.
Yeah.
I mean, God knows. I mean, he got it, but God knows if he doesn't read. I think the most he reads is subtitles. Sometimes you put subtitles up. Sometimes.
Oh, I always have some.
Yeah, it's a bizarre thing. Why is that? Why do you put subtitles up?
If I don't hear someone say
Yeah.
something properly, I just read.
I think it's a concentration issue. So if you're not concentrating, do you use subtitles?
I use it because sometimes what type of media you're watching. It's hard to do, and also depends on what your technology is as well, because speakers and headphones aren't. So you just want to
So I think if I, as an English teacher, I have to get them, as you know from GCSE, you have to read quite a bit of text, don't you? Oh my God, they all need a long lie down after that. Believe me, it's like, oh God, it's so long. And it's like one A4 page, and I'm thinking that's long. They find it really difficult. Also, well, you've got to think about who I'm teaching, right? So these are kids that have not passed all the way through school. So they find their vocabulary is quite limited as well, and they don't understand words, and then so they give up, and then they guess, and then they guess incorrectly, and then they fail again. So it's really hard. It's really hard to get them. I try to introduce all the different new texts, so because they're pretty dry, aren't they, in GCSE? So I've done bits on serial killers and things like that. But
As a follow-up question, do you think if parents
nice.
read to them when they were younger, would that have an influence?
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? I read to my boys from about 4 months old, silly tactile books that, you get ones with mirrors and furry bits. And then we graduated onto and then Julia Donaldson, then the Gruffalo, and then on to David Walliams' books, because they really like that. And then teenage, I don't know, does the brain go a bit mushy or something? I don't know. Or other more important things come along.
I think adult books like the amount of books that you want to
See, when I was about your age, how are you, 17? 16, 17, 18? 18? I was reading things like Harold Robbins, and which were kind of like called bonk busters because they were just about people having sex and stuff like that. It was all. I mean, it wasn't porn. It was just it used to hint at things, like the crashing waves or something. No, wasn't. Or what was the other one that always used to open up on a certain page because the boys had been reading the mucky bits, the fog or something, and the rats. Do you remember? Thingy Herbert.
James Herbert.
James Herbert.
Did you ever read any Henry Miller?
No, he was a bit highbrow. Aeneas Nin. Oh, yeah.
Aeneas Nin.
Yeah.
She's quite good. Anyway, we'll discuss that later.
So, but what do you read? I mean, what interests you at your age? The kind of bridges, kind of sort of like teens to young adults. Is there anything that?
I've been reading the Ritual.
Oh, okay. Is that good?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You quite like whodunits?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think his style's quite accessible, isn't it? Yeah. It's not too highbrow or. I've been reading about how authors are getting a bit fed up with celebrity authors who are dominating like the book lists and things.
Every November and December, we get more and more ghost-written biographies.
Yeah.
But they sell.
Do they?
I think people buy them because they say, "Oh, I need to get someone something for Christmas."
Do you think a lot? I think a lot of books get bought and then stuffed in a stocking and then never read. Someone bought me. I should read it because I like her. Michelle Obama's book. On my shelf, I don't even know. It's so big. I'm like, I haven't got time.
Well,
I haven't got
got
time.
the Barbra Streisand one.
Oh,
my mum bought it for me, but it's 1,000 pages.
I know.
And every time I go to start, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to start it again. But it's a commitment.
Yeah,
It's like taking up a new hobby.
it is.
You know what? I found Lord of the Rings boring when I was a kid.
I always
I
fell
know.
asleep in the second one.
I'm not into fantasy particularly.
Okay, so we've done some. All right. We've done some research about what children like with books, and we found that they quite like talking animals. But my question is, how can we communicate complex ideas to children in like a simple way?
Oh gosh, now you're talking. That's almost psychology, isn't
Well,
it?
we did a session last week on child language development theory.
Right.
So we were looking at Piaget and a couple of other theories.
Nice.
About how children, you can use literature, but more broadly, use storytelling in order to understand the world and future things that are going to happen. There's lots of stories about abandonment.
Yes, well, we were talking about this, weren't we? We were talking about nursery rhymes and fairy tales. Often, like Hansel and Gretel, often is don't wander off because you might get in. Do you know the Hansel and Gretel where they get eaten, don't they?
Yeah.
Along with, she said that they get enticed by sweets, isn't it? I can't remember. Yeah, really grim. And I was talking to Richard about Little Red Riding Hood. I analysed it when I was at uni, actually, many years ago. Many, anyway. And the lecturer there proposed that actually Little Red Riding Hood was about women starting their periods and how they're becoming from girls to women, and beware dodgy men, basically. And the Red Riding Hood, it represents, the menstrual blood and things like that. So I think kids like to be scared, don't they? And certainly as you go into the teen years, you love a horror film.
Because they are allowed, it's almost like being given permission to venture somewhere dangerous.
Yes.
In a safe space. You're going to be okay. It's just a story.
Yeah.
But in the back of your mind, what if I got lost in town with mum's shopping? That probably happens to lots of people.
God, it's awful, isn't it? That suddenly when you can't find your mum. I don't know if you've ever had that.
Total anxiety, yeah.
I vividly remember it happening it to me in the post office, turning around and went, oh, where's my mum? Where's my mum?
And like suddenly you're alone and you're in the woods, metaphorically, and it's like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you. Oh, what did Hansel do? I know you don't literally do that, but there's this idea that these stories, they kind of linger. The themes, they linger on.
I think Julia Donaldson does it really well in her books, doesn't she? She talks about separation from the mum and then trying to get back to the mum, and then The Room on the Broom, isn't it? That's all about working together against the witch? Was it? They all get on the broom and then they went into the mud and they came out looking like a monster or something, yeah.
Viki, I read them this.
Oh, right.
Spike Milligan. And again, it's about two children who get lost. They're going out looking for their cow and they get lost and they meet lots of strange characters. And then they find out about
I don't know that book.
Bad Jelly the Witch. She tries to lure them into her sack.
There's a lot actually when you think about it. There's a lot of children's books about witches, aren't there? When you think about it. I mean, they're not all bad witches, but there's I think the animal's often the rescuer of the children, aren't they, against some evil man or woman or something. So it doesn't answer your question, I'm afraid, because I don't really know. But yeah.
Okay, Steve.
So last week we looked at our own favourite TV shows as a kid to try and find out why we liked them personally. Can you tell us about yours?
So sort of books and stories and TV shows.
God, what did I like? Oh, I used to like The Faraway Tree, which was Enid Blyton. But it was all these fantasy characters who lived in a tree. Do you know it? Yeah.
I love Enid Blyton.
And I used to like, for some reason, boarding school, Mallory Towers. Yeah. Things like that. I really like that. I don't know why. I was one of 4 kids. I think I always wanted to be different. I always wanted to be adopted or something. It's a really weird thing that you go to as a child. I thought, God, imagine if I was adopted and my real mum and dad were.
Yeah, I used to imagine like, maybe one day they'll find out that I was switched.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why you do that. Maybe I don't know. It's a strive to be independent or unique or something, or I don't know. It's a very bizarre thing. In terms of programs, I've got a soft spot for Blue Peter. We used to watch that. We didn't have much choice, to be honest, when I was growing up. Wacky Races, I used to love that. Scooby-Doo, probably what you're watching now to a certain extent. What else did we have? Play School.
So there was Play School. I still watched Blue Peter, but I felt they were like a bunch of squares.
Yeah, it was Blue Peter versus Magpie, wasn't it? Do you remember?
Blue Peter, they were just a bit too pious. You know?
Yeah, they were. As I got older, I just thought, I rejected it. Yes, I did watch it. Only because that was the end of children's programmes before the news came on. We had these 5-minute slots at about 10 to 6. And you'd come home from school, you were allowed to watch a bit of...
Yeah.
There were 2 programmes, basically. It was like a cartoon followed by Blue Peter or some other worthy thing. And then there'd be this 5-minute Magic Roundabout or Hector's House or the Herb Garden. And then you knew the news had come on. And when you're about 7 or 8, it was like, oh, God. The boring bit begins. Oh, God, yeah. Was that with Zippy?
The Zippy and Bungle.
Yeah. Yeah, watched. Colourful, I think that's what I remember about a lot of children's programmes being really colourful and not too long. I think half an hour. No, it was after my time, I think. Scary. Heidi.
Yeah, it was
it foreign?
Show. Yeah, and it was filmed.
Yeah. There were loads of those. Did you ever watch Robinson Crusoe?
Yeah.
Where the waves had come in at the beginning, and we had loads of foreign imports, white horses and things like that.
I also used to, it probably wasn't a children's program, but I loved it as a kid. House on the Prairie.
Little House on the Prairie.
Watch that.
See, I like those books. Laura Ingalls Wilder, yeah.
And when I was a kid, when I look back at it, I'm like, why was like a child watching it? Waltons.
Yeah.
I used to love it.
Alias Smith and Jones.
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're reminiscing now. Have you? What, from the 70s or something, was it? They remade it.
My mum had the actual books.
Yeah.
And then
Do you read it? I remember reading it. Loved it. Loved all their books. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I think Richard asked a similar question earlier, but how do you think reading can affect children's development? Like, for example,
they so need it because it builds up their vocabulary. It helps them escape somewhere in their imagination. It really helps them in future to be able to develop their own stories. And who knows what you can all end up doing? You could end up doing script writing or copywriting, or if you publish your own book, you'd have to think very carefully about what you put on the back of the book, on the blurb. It's really important because that sells the book. So you have to be creative and good at persuasive writing as well. So yeah, reading is so important. It gives you not only vocabulary, but so much information that you can. So what I find with a lot of my students is they're not very curious about the world. So they don't have a lot of information about overseas stuff or history or geography, and that restricts their understanding of what they're reading. They just can't get to grips with it.
Understanding of the world around
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
But is that because they have access to the internet? They've got access to the world.
I don't think so. I think it's always been a thing. There's a sociological term called the learned uncurious. And so I think it goes from, it's often the parental thing. If your parents aren't curious about the rest of the world, you probably won't be.
In terms of like older children, like 13 to 15, how do you think they transition children's books to more complex stories?
I think that's really. I think you can almost see in the balance of text and illustrations. So when they're very young, very illustrative, and it's not too text heavy. Then you go through like David Walliams, where it's sprinkled with a few illustrations. Then you could go down the graphic novel route, where it's almost like a comic, but it's quite sophisticated. Or then as you graduate into more adult themes, it's just text basically, with maybe a few illustrations at the beginning of a chapter. But yeah, I would say it's that balance between text and illustration is quite notable. Obviously, the themes as well change as you get older. It becomes more about social issues, stuff that you're going to go through as a teenager, relationships, what's dangerous.
They will study Shakespeare for their GCSE.
Yes, don't they?
To go from reading young adult novels to Hamlet, for example.
Why?
I find that mind-boggling. How on earth can they transition to that? And how do you really understand Hamlet without having lived a really interesting life?
Well, even Romeo and Juliet, to a certain extent, but or Macbeth even is quite adult theme, isn't it? And if you look back at the history of what's seen as high art and low art, there was a group of academics at Cambridge University in the 1920s, 1930s, F.R. Leavis, Queenie Leavis, they're academics, you don't need to know them, but they basically drew up a list of what they thought was high art. Everything else was low art. Snobs, basically. And unfortunately, it was partly to do with Britishness as well. Shakespeare became like this icon. And then it got shoved down everyone's throats all the time. There is an argument to actually drop it completely from the curriculum. A really high-level English specialist wrote in the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago saying, get rid of it. Go back to just more modern texts that engage. I think Shakespeare has its place, but I don't think it should be on
oh, yeah, definitely.
I think you could do snippets. You can learn a bit. You can look at his sonnets or something. You don't have to do a whole play, though, in depth, I don't think.
And I think it's the same with poetry as well. Getting, a 14, 15-year-old to read some of the great poets of the world. They often end up hating poetry, which I think is a travesty. But if we introduce them to different things, they built up to them, it could be different.
Do you know Brian Bilston? So when I taught, if I ever teach poetry, I start with him because he does his poems in the shape of what he's talking about, in the shape of a tree or something, or with falling leaves, but they're words that fall. It's a bit more interactive. He's quite funny. He's speaking in Ashford next year. It's good.
I don't agree with that, actually. I think Shakespeare should be in GCSE. Because I know.
No, I agree. I just think we need to help them understand it.
Yeah, I don't think it should be gone altogether. I just think maybe a whole play, maybe.
Because I know a lot of people that wouldn't go out of their way to look
No.
at poetry or Shakespeare. So, in what world would they ever be introduced to that?
True.
It's true,
Good
actually.
point. That's
Yeah,
their only chance
yeah.
for
You
some
shouldn't
of them.
narrow that. Yeah, you
Yeah.
shouldn't narrow people's options. Actually, it's a good point, Chelsea. Mm.
Amazing.
What are your memories of Jackanory? And do you think it could be good for children if it was remade for children nowadays? Do you
Is
think
it
would
not?
be-
Is it stopped, Jackanory?
No, it's like CDs.
Oh, okay. Has it just been rebranded then?
Yeah, it got
Right.
rebranded in the 90s as Jackanory.
With sexy
Something,
celebrities or
yeah.
something.
And yeah, I mean, do you think it could resonate? Children being read
Did
to
I
on
like
TV?
Jackanory? Did I like Jackanory? I can't remember. It's not on my top. I think I liked it when I was little, and then I found it boring when I was probably from about 10 onwards, I think. I thought, oh God, Jackanory. I think maybe because the books they chose or the people who read it, I can't remember. They weren't sexy. It's people like Pam Ayres and that. Oh, God.
Kenneth Williams. Okay, not sexy. Okay.
No, but you know, not anybody our age, always older people.
Oh yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
always.
Wasn't like
They were the establishment.
I think in the 90s they had like Beckham and people like that, or noughties. They had like much more accessible.
Yeah, I am joking. Yes, I am joking.
He used to be in the Carry On films. Oh, that was it. Was he in the Carry On films?
Yeah.
And Doctor on the Go, whatever they were called. Yeah, and I can't remember watching it with my kids. I don't know. I think we did our own Jackanory, probably.
Well, that's what we did.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we used to all snuggle up in bed and read a book together. My eldest went through a phase of having the same story every night. Oh my God. And he had to wear his same Fireman Sam top every day. Just a phase. Thank you for the Earl Grey. Anyway, sorry.
Out of all the children's literature you've read or like listened to, what do you think's the best like message that's come across from it that's just like really resonated with you?
Oh God. Ooh, I don't know. That's really tricky. What, for little ones or?
Yeah, like what like the Hansel and Gretel, like don't.
Oh, I
go into the
think
woods.
no, but I think it's gone from don't do that to actually. I think Julia Donaldson is actually much more positive. Go out, explore the world. Don't be scared. Yeah, I liked Snow on the Whale because that was all about exploring the world, wasn't it? That was really good. Yeah, I think the more and like Jackie Wilson as well. She's much more about don't be afraid of the world. There's opportunities. I think it's much more of a positive message these days than they used to be, and
more sheltered.
And carrying well, maybe I don't know. Maybe they didn't when we were little. We were just left more to our own devices.
Yeah, I often say parents didn't start caring until probably the late 90s. Until then, it was like, go out in the morning, try and come home before dark.
Yes, yeah.
See what happened.
I remember because when I grew up, I grew up in Yorkshire, and we grew up in a cul-de-sac, and there were loads of kids there, and we also used to get chucked out the house after school. Big main road at the top. We crossed it or went under the subway, which was equally dangerous because there was a dodgy bloke that used to hang around there. And then we had the big town fields, big fields over, and we all used to just hang about there till about 9 at night, and I don't think they even noticed if we'd come over or not. It's really weird, isn't it? So maybe there were more stranger danger things that had to be to the literature then, and nowadays it's like, stop being so mollycoddled, go out, explore the world, because I think kids are staying at home longer these days, aren't they, because they can't afford to move. Like when you read the biographies of people who grew up in the 50s and 60s, they go, I left home at 16 and went to London to get a job. I mean, that would be like child abuse almost. But yeah, I think they grew up quicker back then. Maybe.
Finally then, so you've worked in publishing. You teach English. You've read lots of literature. You've read to your children, and they don't read.
No, I know.
So, yeah.
Maybe they'll come back to it. I don't know.
So it just feels like there can't be. If there was a way to encourage reading in children and then adults, someone
Really
like you would
hard.
have cracked it.
Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I gave up. I don't know. But I remember going through their teenage years and trying to buy them. You know, the Cherub books? Do you know that? About, they were undercover cops or something.
I think I did.
So there was a whole series of books aimed at teenage boys, basically, who were giving up on reading. It was all about them. It was a bit like Kingsman type thing. Have you seen that? Yeah, so it's a bit like that. You getting rough kids to work for the government and do undercover stuff. And that was quite good. And then as soon as they got into sort of like year 10, 11, they'd come up with the excuses, they've got GCSEs to do, I've got that to read, I've got bothered. And then on social media, YouTube.
Very quickly, just the first thing that comes to your mind, what are your thoughts on the Harry Potter books?
My kids never read them. They don't like fantasy. I read them. I thought they were good in that they got people reading.
Yeah.
But now I think now the film's out, they don't bother reading the books, just watch the films probably.
I think Warner Brothers are looking at turning them into a TV series now.
Oh, really?
Recasting, starting again from scratch, but as a TV series.
Harry Potter, all the Harry Potter books.
Do you? What I'm interested in is, do you think there's only a certain number of stories? So that's why they just keep creating the same thing. Make more money, but there does seem to be like a peak of interesting new things.
It's not even about being innovative anymore. It's about
like all the Marvel franchising. That's dull, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sequels.
Like every Disney film, like 2015.
Well, we will endeavour to come up with some interesting stories, and then we're going to choose 2 or 3 of them, and we're going to make a little Jack and Nori short.
That'll be awesome.
We'll make sure you get to see them.
I might, if you give me permission, show some of my English groups.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be all right.
Yeah.
Fame.
Has anyone got any other final comments or questions for Viki?
Well, listen, I'm downstairs. I mean, along the English and Maths corridors, so or just grab me if you see me around. But it's been great. It's been really lovely
meeting
you all.
And it's been really great to.
And I'm sorry I couldn't answer all your questions.
No. It's been good discussion, so it's really, really worked well. And
it's been really interesting.
It's nice to get another face in the room as well.
Yeah.
Just mine.
Well, maybe you should come and visit my English.
I would love to.
See if you can. See if you can.